welcome to The Spawn Chunks, episode number 301 for Monday, June 10th, 2024. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this, or watching this, in the case of YouTube. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Rift, and strumming along with me, as always, is Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Well played. And if you would like to hear more about the ups and downs of my new, currently rented guitar as I take on a new musical journey, or the lows of Johnny's RAM issues with his main working PC, then you should listen to the Render Distance, where you can commiserate and enjoy the newfound passions that we have. We'll leave it at that. Yeah. In the Render Distance, that's the extended version of the podcast. We record an extra 20 to 40 minutes every week for our patrons. You can go to patreon.com/thespawnchunks to support the show. And even at the base level, you get access to the extended recording every single week. And you can use the Patreon RSS feed to have that drop into your favorite podcaster. You don't even have to go looking for it. It just comes right to the app every week. Also, for our patrons, we have the Minecraft Monthly Hangout. That is usually the last Saturday of the month, so you can expect that coming up on June 29th. Details and times on that is usually posted in our Discord a little bit closer to the actual date, so pay attention there. And the Quarterly Hangout, which is where Johnny and I go over the numbers for the podcast, the downloads, the YouTube metrics as they may be changing now that we are doing a video podcast. That is something we're going to be discussing, I would say early July, but depends on when Johnny is back from a trip. So again, keep an eye out in the Discord for us finalizing when that's going to be.
Yes. We also want to say a big thank you to everybody who celebrated episode 300 with us and the launch of our new video format. We had a lot of really positive feedback, a lot of very constructive feedback on the new video format, so we will be implementing some of that going forward and keeping it in mind. The video version of the show is going to be iterative. It's going to be something that we work on and improve as things go. So hopefully you'll continue to watch this on the Spawn Chunks YouTube channel over at youtube.com/thespawnchunks. If you're an audio listener, check it out. You get to see Joel and my face every so often. And while our patrons have been getting used to this for a little while, it's all new for the public audience. So hopefully folks are continuing to enjoy that.
So what's new with you in Minecraft, my friend, now that you are no longer on Minecraft SOS?
Yeah, I feel like we should probably do a little wrap-up for Minecraft SOS, considering that it's now officially ended. The videos went up this weekend, and I, despite my PC issues, was able to get out a finale. So I shared some of the screenshots last week, but I've completed this terrain extractor, as I'm thinking of it, as inspired by Paul Chedeson's Solstice 5 short film. I went over some stats on the Twitch VOD for the last stream I did from Minecraft SOS, so you can go back to Twitch and watch that, or I might try and upload it to my VOD's YouTube channel as well. But in total, I mined over 1.5 million blocks. Obviously had a lot of help from my server mates for some of that, because at least like 7 or 8 of the chunks that were mined out were mined by other people on the server, so we're probably looking at closer to 2 million in total in that like circular area. About 60,000 of those ended up getting reused, rebuilding the terrain, and then about 50,000 white concretes, plus some diorite and a few extra things, went into the build of the machine itself. And all in all, I was really happy with it. The server ended in very chaotic fashion, so as I was going around kind of placing my tools in chests and burying them in the circle that I was expecting to build like more, more elaborate monuments to each of them, the world border started closing in on us. And this was an event that had been planned behind the scenes, but it all kind of escalated towards the end, where we couldn't fly for very long, otherwise we'd be struck by lightning, and the world border was creeping in from the outside and forcing us back in towards spawn, where, usual server chaos happened. People were goofing around, trying to get each other struck by lightning by placing lightning rods behind us, and like at one point Mythical Sausage flew into the air and got struck by lightning and died mid-air. And so his gravestone was just sort of hanging above the tavern that he had built at spawn and stuff like that. And so we all just kind of squeezed into maybe like a 12 by 12 area around spawn where the world border stopped. And then we all sort of declared the series over and then went into goofy PvP mode where we were all trying to kill Thwip, and he was eating golden apples as he went and stuff like that. So we had a good time. I ended up getting taken out by Shelby with a stray arrow. And it was really fun. It was a nice way to send off a server that has been chaotic, improvisational, hasn't been too kind of heavy on the thematic building, and in my case was just one big project from start to finish. And it's been really interesting seeing how a project like that took shape in a world I knew was going to be short term. I just wanted to do one really big thing instead of lots of little like houses as part of a village or something like that. And I think sticking to that and managing to pace myself to the stage where I knew I was going to get it done well within the last week of the server being live, I think was tremendously confidence building for me, because I think when it's come to time management in other projects and giving myself deadlines, I feel like I always overshoot or underestimate how much time I have left, and there's a bunch of factors timing wise that don't quite calculate right in my brain. So I think it was nice to be able to complete this and feel like I could already put a button on a series that we knew was going to be limited time when we set out to do this. And obviously with it being really close to update 1.21 launching, it seemed like a really great time for the series to have ended, because we were all thinking about moving on to other things and enjoying the new features for Tricky Trials anyway.
I don't know what you mean about project creep. I wouldn't have any idea as to how that could happen. But no, I think that's important, though. I think that it's a good skill to have with Minecraft, especially for a lot of players out there that might not own their own server. They might be playing on someone else's server.
Yeah.
They might be playing on a public server where they don't know when they'll have to like either be removed or what their time might be. It could be something as simple as just running out of funds. You know, like you can't pay for the service anymore, so you have to stop. I mean, I guess you could, depending on if it's a realm, I guess you could always download it and play it as a single player world later. But it's one of those things that I think is an important skill to have.
Yeah, and in this case, it was also working around the concept of, well, what if I die and I can't be revived on this server with, like, you know, hardcore but with revivals? And so there were a lot of people, you know, maybe building iteratively and building kind of gradually piece by piece on their project, just thinking, well, as long as I get this done, it doesn't matter if I die, because then it still feels like there are some completed pieces of this area. Whereas in my case, I really wanted to do one large project. If I died midway through that, the project was always going to be unfinished. So the fact that I was able to survive to the end, and I had a couple of people revive me along the way because they wanted to see this project complete at a certain point, I think it felt good to have managed to get that done. But obviously the flip side to this is that I'm now back in the Minecraft Survival Guide. The Season 3 world is continuing into update 1.21. And back in the world, I went to find some armadillos and some wolf variants. There's some, like, a few places in my world where I've generated biomes where wolves would have spawned previously. So I have pale wolves where they wouldn't now spawn naturally. Like, you're going to find that variant in taiga biomes, but I was finding it in regular forests and a few other places around the world. But then going out into far-flung savanna regions to get hold of armadillos and armadillo scutes, I then found a spotted wolf in a savanna plateau biome close by, and then a woods wolf on the way home. So I ended up taming 3 wolves and playing around with wolf armor, sort of demonstrating the mechanics of that for the tutorial series. And this week we're going to be trimming chunks ready for the update to 1.21, so I'll be diving back into using MCA selector and talking about the reasons why you might want to trim area out of your world, revising that for the folks who know it already, and potentially, you know, explaining it to people who are new to 1.20. But I'm looking forward to that, and of course, with the update dropping later this week, there's lots more tutorials on the horizon, I imagine.
I'm really looking forward to you getting into the crafter and the tutorials that you're going to come out with, because I think that's probably the gift that keeps on giving.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You can go over the basics of how to use it, but then like how to use it contextually as you go through your world and come up with new ideas and new reasons and ways to use it, and then how it all, I guess, folds into existing blocks, because it gives new tutorials for old blocks too. You know, like it's just something as simple as making chests is now very different as far as the tutorial goes, right? So I think that's really cool.
It's going to be interesting to see what areas still have yet to feel fully automated once the crafter is in place, right? Because crafting is one of those steps that feels very, like, player-led up until this point, but then there's still things like, you know, planting crops. Like, I was thinking, what if you've still got to have a way of automatically planting, say, netherwort if you wanted to get a netherwart block farm on the go, assuming you're not getting that just from farming, crimson trees or something. But if you wanted to make, say, red nether bricks, for example, you need netherwart and you need to combine those because you don't find them naturally anywhere. You can't generate them. So, that process of crafting them could be automated by a crafter, but you still got to generate nether bricks from spare netherrack that you've smelted and then farm the netherwart yourself. So like what aspects of that can still be automated, and what like innovative ways can players come up with stuff like that? That's the stuff that I'm curious about once we enter the age of the crafter. That and the pushback from people who might think, well, we want to start a manual crafting revolution now that the robots are taking our jobs. That's the thing I'm curious about. Is there going to be any pushback in the same way that people started fishing manually during the height of AFK fish farms being a problem, Like, right. I'm curious where the balance is going to lie when all's said and done.
Well, I'm Team Autocrafter. Y'all can keep your vinyl music discs. I'm gonna.
Joel's like, let me keep building over here while all the stuff gets crafted for me.
Yeah, exactly. If anything, because I'm nowhere near finished Westhill, and I mean Thursday, I think it's Thursday, is when Tricky Trials comes out.
Yeah.
I'm really going to have to be careful not to get tempted to be sucked into like a giant break from Westhill. I might take a little one to like maybe set up a, like an auto chest maker, just something that I'm going to find useful. In my building that's remaining in Westhill, something like that. Or if I think of like some idea for that sci-fi zone where I think, I'm going to need an awful lot of this one particular resource or two, I might just go ahead and set up an auto crafter somewhere in my vicinity where it's going to be loaded and auto working in the background, just so that when I start the new project, I'm not starting with like a whole lot of collection or a whole lot of like, talking without building anything. It'd be nice to actually go ahead and do something. So, but I haven't even gotten that far as to plan what's coming next. But for now, what I've been doing has been continuing the work on the pumpkin farm. And I was not feeling the pumpkin fields this week. And so I thought, this house is in the background of all of my screenshots. So I decided to finish the textures on the roof of the pumpkin farmhouse. The chimney needed some adjustments, some final textures, the addition of like smoke coming out of it with a campfire at the top. I added a growing bush and some vines to go up over the chimney and the roof. And man, I'm so glad that we have the vine growth turned off via the game rule on the Citadel. It means that you can just control them. It means you can't do a automatic vine farm. Like you have to, like, you can't just grow vines in the background, but you can get them off of jungle trees and mangrove trees, right? So at least you can collect them that way, which is how I restocked the last time I ran out. And then I also took the time to just finish the interior, which was not that difficult and not that time consuming because it's a one-room house. Like the bed is in the corner, the table's by the window, and the kitchen is up against the wall, along with the fireplace. But some really fun details with some armor statue data pack touches, some mini block touches. Both of those are from Vanilla Tweaks as data packs. And a really nice tip from my chat room where I used the coal ore block to look like soot on the floor near the fireplace. And I found that very effective. I was going to do two of them, but it felt a little overkill just because it's such a small space. It felt really dirty. But just those kind of little touches, I think, are really, really fun. And when you're in a minimalist place like that, you're like, well, one, this is great. This is not going to take me several streams to finish. I did it in half a stream. So it was only an hour worth of work to finish the inside. And it's just enough detail where I feel like I've checked the box. It's not left untouched. It's been thought about. There's a chest in the corner that makes sense. There's candles on the tables to light the place, all that kind of stuff. And then finally, the other thing that I did was, as I learned from the last time I did a farm, it was really helpful to finish the house and then the gardens outside the house and then kind of radiate out from there. So like, rather than finishing the texture on the path, I wanted to finish the gardens on the house and then the path can go around that. And so that's what we did. We used orange tulips and some azure blue A's, so they're white ones. And the orange tulips really complement all the pumpkins. And I haven't gotten around to using melons, which you recommended last week, but I did go and get some pumpkin mini blocks. I think I had some already. And then I put one on the counter in the kitchen, and there's one in the field. But as I finish up the field, there's going to be a lot more little pumpkins, especially closer to the path where it's going to be a nicer transition from the full pumpkin block down to a mini block down to the path. It's going to feel less like you're walking between walls of pumpkins and a little bit more of a gradual, I guess, descent down to the path. So when I do those final details, I'll have more of that stuff in there. But for now, the house is done. It's nice to check it off the to-do list. I'm pretty happy with it.
The orange flowers make me think, this pumpkin farmer seems like that person who everyone goes, what am I going to get them for their birthday or for Christmas or whatever? Oh, they like orange stuff. And so they've just been given all of the orange gifts and everything. Like, I'm kind of surprised that the bedclothes and the candles aren't orange as well. But I guess you didn't want to go too cartoonish with it. And I think
tried that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The orange bed is very different than an orange pumpkin. Like, it is bright. It is neon orange. Like a lot of the primary colors, like the concrete colors in Minecraft, they're very, very bright. If you stick an orange piece of concrete next to a pumpkin, you realize just how not orange the pumpkin is.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
By comparison.
It's subtle by comparison,
yeah. So I went with brown because inside the house, I did a lot of dark oak, strip dark oak. I did use the tables and chairs data pack in a couple of places, and that just helps balance off the lighter tones, because I'm surprised the roof works as well as it is, because it's a mix of jungle planks, spruce planks, and granite. And it's not as big as the reference that I was using. So the reference had a better gradient because it was like a 4 or 5 block tall roof, and mine's only 4. And it's a smaller build altogether. So it was harder to work in all the details, but I think it works pretty well. I stepped away from it thinking like, okay, I'm thinking about this too much and it's starting to look like noise to me. So I need to kind of back up a bit. I may revisit it. There might be some spots where I might want to add more spruce, I think, and I'm trying not to, because that's kind of my default. I've kind of done that a lot, so I'm trying not to use it as a crutch. I'm trying to like expand and kind of like live with my decisions and kind of like learn and move on, as opposed to like return and edit constantly. I think the only thing that I did not find as intuitive is that I didn't really have a reason for putting the textures down on the roof. So some of the lower parts have more spruce, I think, just by happenstance. But there's also a lot of spruce in the top. And normally when I do 3 or 4 different colors in a roof, I have some sort of gradient in mind where like the spruce is at the bottom, the jungle would be at the top, and then granite would kind of be in the middle. And I would mix them up. But like generally speaking, that's where the majority of those blocks would be. But it's a pretty scattered mix. So on that scale, it's hard to show this is a worn section of the roof versus not. It's more like just avoiding a checkerboard pattern, right? That's about your only mission when you've got such a small scale build. But I like the chimney. I think the chimney is my favorite part of the outside of the whole thing.
Yeah, I think it looks great. And honestly, yeah, I totally feel you with wanting to add some texture into the roof whilst avoiding that noisy look is so difficult at that kind of scale. But I think you've achieved that pretty well. Yeah, the granite just looks like, a worn section where maybe the planks are coming up a little bit and it's not quite as uniform and straight as the wooden plank texture typically is. So I think that works. And we'll be able to share some screenshots. Obviously, they're going to be in the show notes and in the Discord for our patrons, but we've been working those into the video format as well. So if people want to give a little bit of feedback in the comments section as well, be nice, of course, but you're welcome to chime in. We're going to move on into the news, though, because this week, obviously leading up to Minecraft 1.21, we have had pre-releases 3 and 4 for Minecraft Java Edition. We're expecting maybe some release candidates early this week before they move on to the finished release, which should be coming out on Thursday of this week. So pre-release 3 was published June 5th. To quote the article, we introduced some intentional but undocumented changes to the Windburst enchantment in pre-release 1 last week. To remedy this, we're including those changes in this changelog instead. So the changes to the Windburst from 1.21 pre-1. The Windburst enchantment now bounces the player 7 blocks up per enchantment level. This means at level 3, the enchantment will bounce the player 21 blocks up, which, the changelog article notes, will hurt quite a bit when hitting the ground again. Players will need to make sure they have some means of mitigating the full damage, such as feather falling, elytra, slow falling potions, or a fresh target. Technical changes in pre-release 3. The datapack version is now 48. There's just one change that this brings, where the replace disk entity effect type had its spelling corrected to use a K for the word disk instead of a C. Fixed bugs of note in pre-release 3. Most of these are from recent snapshot versions rather than being long-standing bugs within the game. Placing a map into an item frame and removing it did not remove the green player marker. Hanging leashed boats gained excessive upward momentum. Leashed boats' leashes disappeared upon rejoining the world. Leashing a boat to a fence which already has a lead attached to it removed the existing lead rather than attaching the new one. Teleporting a leashed boat with chest or a raft with chest to another dimension made a ghost lead. Placed boats and raft no longer faced the same direction as the player, and boats and raft with chests could not be leashed if they had a passenger. So a lot of stuff related to the new boats with leashes behavior that was a parity addition after it's been in Bedrock Edition for a little while. As usual, there are more bug fixes listed in the pre-release 3 changelog. That's linked in our show notes over at thespawnchunks.com. Pre-release 4 arrived shortly afterwards on June 7th, 2024, with a couple more bug fixes and some tweaks to the blast resistance and fire protection enchantments. So the changes in 1.21 pre-release 4, the burning time reduction effect of fire protection and the knockback resistance effect of blast protection now stack from wearing several pieces. Now, to get the maximum benefit of these effects, you need to wear a full set of enchanted armor. Wearing a fully enchanted armor set still grants the same effect as in 1.20.6. Wearing only a single piece of enchanted armor now has a reduced effect compared to before. One additional change, after a primed TNT has gone through a nether portal, it will no longer be able to destroy nether portal blocks. A few more bug fixes arrived in this pre-release as well, including the prevention of fall damage from wind charges not being retained upon reloading the world. Wind charges sometimes did not prevent fall damage, so most of those cases should have been ironed out now. Boat clutching, i.e. catching yourself by mounting a boat after using a wind charge, resulted in the player taking fall damage. That should have been fixed as well. Wind burst damaging the player twice on one use, even when using wind charges. Using a wind charge to stop fall damage after using the wind burst enchantment didn't correctly cancel the damage, and the mace was able to be enchanted with sharpness, which was not intentional. So all of those have been fixed. Once again, the full changelog can be found at minecraft.net or linked in our show notes over at thespawnchunks.com.
The wind burst does sound a bit extreme to me, but I think that it heightens gameplay. And
yeah,
I think it makes the enchantment more diverse and moves players away from just going straight to the max. Because if the max was a height that didn't hurt, that wasn't silly, that was useful, then why would anybody bother with enchantment level 1, 2, 3, or 4?
Yeah.
They would just go straight to the max. Whereas here it's like, well, no, the useful ones are going to be in the middle, depending on what you want to do. But if you want to have some silly fun, if you want to create like a PvP arena where it's just banana town, then go at it and have everybody use the max 21 block high, wind burst, which I think is wild. And that's cool. And I think that shows the level of fun that Mojang wants to add to the mace and the wind burst. And so it's not just practical. Like, we understand the silliness that's involved here. And so we're going to amp that up just a little bit and let people have some fun with it.
Yeah, that was my instinct as well. I think Windburst is probably one of the first enchantments I actually don't want the max level from, where everything else you typically do want to max out. Maybe you don't want a super efficient shovel so that you don't absolutely smash through bits of sand or whatever, but I think in a lot of cases, Riptide is the only other one I can think of that people really needed to back off from having full level 3, and most of the time that was just because they wanted certain effects from it. I'm thinking back to the Trident golf courses that they built on Hermitcraft, where they wanted to have a driver for a long range throw, and then they wanted something a little bit more a little bit more close range. But Windburst 2 really feels like it's going to be the happy medium between decent PvE damage. I'm speaking mainly from a PvE perspective here, as I know you are as well. It's going to have a decent risk-reward balance, and ultimately you're going to feel like you have more control. Because, jumping 21 blocks in the air is going to feel pretty wild the first few times you do it. Maybe you'd end up getting used to it, but that's going to be a really high jump, whereas I think 14 blocks is probably going to be more manageable, and you potentially, if you land and take a bit of full damage, you'll be able to recover before whatever you were trying to hit comes over and probably blows you up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be one rushing out to get the mace anyway, but I think that it would be interesting to experience in one of those fun environments, because I don't see myself finding a need for it or use for it in just everyday survival gameplay. It's
Yeah.
more about those unique situations, servers where there's some events, or something like a PvP server where it's like that's the whole vibe is just meant to smash other people. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing what the Mace culture is like. You know, what sort of mini games and stuff like that evolve around it. Maybe some stuff that people might even have made goofy game modes like this in the past, just using, you know, command blocks and whatever other kind of physics tools that Minecraft gives you to play around with by default. But now those are possible, along with wacky knockback mechanics and stuff. You could also get into like Mace jumping and combo mechanics, and you can do some fun stuff with that. But I don't know if it's really going to be something that a single player world is going to benefit from a great deal, unless you want to create spectacle. My main plan for the Mace is to try and bonk everything, like be able to one-shot everything in the game and just have like a checklist of stuff that I tick off. But I want to do that as like either a separate video or like an ongoing challenge in my world, rather than it being something that I plan on using as a combat technique all of the time. Like, it feels kind of absurd to be doing it that way. I'm especially curious about how that's going to work for mobs like Elder Guardians, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I suppose.
Yeah, that would be difficult. I guess you'd have to capture one and hold it in a minecart.
Probably, yeah. Get it onto dry land somehow.
Dry land, yeah.
It takes a lot more setup than just, you know, it's not going to be something you can casually use in an ocean monument.
Just the thought of swimming with a giant mace is like, that doesn't seem like it would be possible anyway.
Creates a little extra drag, yeah.
So how do you feel about the changes to fire protection and blast protection?
I think, like most people, I was confused by this, and I think it was sort of fed to me secondhand initially. Like, I didn't read the changelog notes on this at first, and so I wasn't really aware of what the deal was. Having taken another look at it, I can see what they're trying to do with blast and fire protection, effectively having like set bonuses. And this is something that other games with like defined armor sets do really well. Like, I'm thinking to stuff like Terraria. I think even in like games like Diablo, you end up with, if you've got all of one specific named set of armor, then if you're wearing the full thing, then you get like a maxed out bonus to whatever stat, and you can build your character around that a little bit. It also, I think this goes towards eliminating the issue that occurred on Bedrock Edition, where if you wear a full set of fire protection armor, it prevents you from catching fire entirely. And I wasn't sure at first. I hadn't done the maths to see if this was like overall a buff to wearing a full set of blast or fire protection, or a nerf to only wearing one piece along with your regular protection armor. But the changelog, I think, clarifies that by saying like wearing the full set of armor is the equivalent of, you know, having the same effect in 1.20.6, but it doesn't stack like multiplicatively the way it used to, or you know, it's not as easy as just like throwing fire protection on your boots and then suddenly you have a ton of extra protection against the burning time. It doesn't give you any additional protection or any less protection than wearing that one suit of armor would against the damage source, right? It's just the secondary effect that's being influenced here, and that was something that I think had to be clarified after the fact by people, because the changelog didn't quite make that clear, or a few people read it and then just pulled out a few words and jumped to the wrong conclusion.
Yeah, the way that the changelog is worded is, I mean, if matter of fact, and because you and I are used to reading the changelogs, I mean, it says what it says, and it isn't inaccurate. But I think it doesn't take into consideration how most of the internet and most of the Minecraft player base tends to think and parse information, and how quickly, with such a huge player base, a little bit of disinformation, a little bit of misunderstanding can all of a sudden become a very big thing. And I watched Exumavoid's video on this. Has a great video. It's very short, on pre-release 4, explaining that the changes to these enchantments are to the secondary effects and not the damage. It's to the time on fire for fire protection and the knockback for blast protection. So it doesn't actually affect how much you get hurt. It's just how far you fly backwards. And I agree with Exumavoid's take on it, which is, to quote him, these are the kind of unnecessary changes that no one asked for. And it's not fun to be on fire for longer, regardless of whether you're taking any extra damage or not. You've got fire protection on, and the fact that you really burn, you know, for just as long with one piece And then only if you add 2, 3, 4 pieces do you burn for less time. It's just it's almost a nerf, because then you have that fire screen, like you can't see what you're doing, and it's not necessarily panic inducing for anybody that's played the game a while, but if you don't know what's going on, it's really kind of a problem. And just because you don't take damage when you're on fire longer is really counterintuitive. Like, if I'm on fire in real life, the longer I'm on fire, bad. Like that's kind of where it rolls, right? And Slice Lime actually chimed in on Twitter in response to most people misinterpreting the change and said, okay, so lots of people are upset over something that absolutely did not happen here. The armor enchantment changes apply to two side effect enchantments, not the amount of protection. Read the details in the changelog. So I went, all right, well, I'll read the details in the changelog. And the problem is that in the changelog, it assumes that most players know that fire protection and blast protection have 2 attributes each. We do a news show, and I didn't know that they had 2 attributes each. I thought they did what they said on the tin. The changelog did not state that there were no changes to damage taken under the effect, right? So it said that what they were changing, but they didn't anticipate any confusion and then clarify, by the way, this doesn't change the damage. One line nips all of this in the butt. They also outline the changes, but because they use general terms in the outline details rather than the specific language they do in the overview, it's a little hard to, you get lost pretty quickly. And I also think, that it's really counterintuitive that the longer you burn doesn't matter. Like, if you're getting more fire protection, I think by default you should be on fire for less time. I think that's just how the enchantment should work in the first place. And so I really don't know what sparked the reason for going in and fixing this, outside of maybe a parity change, like you said, with Bedrock, wanting to make the Bedrock thing function normally, but then also saying, okay, well, if we're going to change that, then we should change it on both Java and Bedrock so that we don't end up with more parity issues than less. But yeah, it's just, I'm clear on what it does now. I hope our listeners are clear on what it does now. But to me, it was not super clear from the changelog in terms of me thinking like the vast majority of Minecraft players. Like, I kind of felt like, yeah, you're leaving yourself open to some misinterpretation there.
Yeah, I just genuinely can't think of a situation I get into in this game where having specialized protection over all-round protection enchantments makes any sort of sense. Like, yeah, if I'm playing in a PvP tournament and we're all using bows, then I want a set of projectile protection armor. But if I'm just playing survival Minecraft, the specialized stuff doesn't make any sense. So I do wonder if maybe this is a change that's intended for minigame style gameplay where, if players are going to be on fire a whole bunch, then collecting the full set of fire protection armor gives them more of an advantage. But for general survival PvE, I can't imagine wanting to even mess with the specialized protections now, because full protection is just going to be even better than it was by comparison, So I feel like it's a shame that at this point it feels like the team is trying to make the old thinking around these style of enchantments work for the modern game. Instead of completely reworking the system, they're trying to think, well, how can we incentivize players to use a full set of fire protection armor? Let's make it so that it doesn't do as much if you're just wearing one piece, so that people will make the switch. People won't make the switch. They'll just continue wearing full protection armor. That's the real problem, is you can't retroactively apply something like this and then make it a nerf to the existing mechanics. But they also don't want to make it overpowered by comparison. So yeah, it's a really difficult situation, and I think a lot of that just depends on the way the enchantment system was set up from a long time ago. It's either going to result in them ditching that entirely and having to retrain players in what protection is, or just grafting on these other systems that don't feel like they make as much sense.
And anytime that I'm in a situation where there's going to be a lot of fire or risk of death by fire, I've got a fire resistance potion or a shulker box full of them, and that's my go-to, because that's full it just plain doesn't matter.
Yeah.
right? Like you just 0 damage. You just have to watch the timer and make sure that when it runs out, you take another one. That to me is a more efficient way of doing it, because then my enchantments on my armor just remain the same with whatever I want to do for regular gameplay. I understand I'm coming from like a end game situation, so not everybody that's starting brand new will have access to potions right away. So like I get that, but for I think a lot of players that can get to that level quite quickly, then there's a lot of attention and a lot of changes being made here that ultimately don't matter in the bulk of gameplay. Like once you pass the first few stages of progression, like you're kind of done with fire aspect or fire protection on your armor, I think.
Yeah, but all that is so minor, and we're still very much looking forward to 1.21. It's just strange that these little tweaks to things are like getting slipped in under the wire in these pre-releases. But yeah, maybe that's something that we'll see additional changes to once the update releases and we're into the decimal releases for 1.21. Either way, we're now going to move on to chunk mail. That's the listener email portion of the show. We had a ton of listener email, obviously, last week for our episode 300 special, but the emails have continued to roll in about the usual stuff that we get to talk about in the chunk mail section. We got Minecraft questions and scenarios and stuff that we like to have people email in and for Joel and I to discuss. If you would like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. As always, we encourage people to keep them short and sweet. And Joel is here with the first email.
First one comes in from Wake Gilliams. I see what you did there, Wake. The subject is, why is swimming so tough? Spelt on purpose, I think. Tuff. Good day, Joel and Pix. In regards to all of the new updates coming in 1.21 next week, this obviously was written last week, there seems to be a large focus around mobility with the wind charge and the mace. As a Bedrock player on console, I don't have the luxury of movement underwater with an elytra and rockets just like Java players do. Would either of you find it to be useful to update an enchantment for your boots that would allow you to swim faster, much like Dolphin's Grace, without having to lug around the watery mammals? This enchantment could be mutually exclusive, not being able to pair with boots that have the Depth Strider enchantment. Curious to hear your thoughts. Cheers! Wake Gilliams died from exhaustion thanks to his netherite boots weighing him down.
The Water Temple is everyone's least favorite Zelda level, as always. Yeah, no, I get where Wake Gilliams is coming from, but I think the thing is, Depth Strider is already fulfilling this job for me. Like, I get that Depth Strider feels like it's reducing drag rather than making you a faster swimmer, right? It's not the speed boost that Dolphin's Grace is, but if you've used Dolphin's Grace when you don't have Depth Strider on your boots, you just end up swimming a little bit faster, and it sort of feels like having Depth Strider for a brief period of time. Obviously, the combination of Depth Strider 3 and Dolphin's Grace is when you just start moving at like rocket speed. But I feel like Depth Strider is sort of compensating in the right way. It's an enchantment that does help you swim faster than you can by default. I suppose the distinction here is that the proposal is that it's something that would only work while swimming, whereas Depth Strider works when you're just bobbing up and down in the water and you haven't sprinted to enter that swimming animation. So I guess you'd return to normal pace when you were just bobbing around in the water. But for me, that feels like a hindrance because it's not smooth at that point. It sort of has the same problem of like when you're trying to take off from water with Elytra, or when you land in water on Java Edition, you still have your Elytra enabled. It feels like, to me, Depth Strider would be preferable than something that just makes me swim faster circumstantially. I don't know if you feel the same way about this, Joel, but it feels like Depth Strider is already filling this niche for me.
Yeah, I don't need to swim faster. In many cases, and I think this has to do with being underwater, but also like in swim mode, but still maybe touching a block, like your belly down in a block. I move too fast. Like if I'm trying to place blocks, like I overshoot all the time. It's a real point of frustration. I actually get seasick, unironically, underwater in Minecraft if I'm there for too long because of the weird way that you bob in and out of swim mode. Like the camera moves vertically very quickly, and it gets to me after a while. Once or twice I'm fine, but like if I'm in there for an hour doing like landscaping underneath a river bed, then I'm in a rough spot. One thing I do like is that the idea of having them mutually exclusive does feel like a nerf. Like I totally agree with you there. That's not what I would want either, because then the moment that I'm not swimming, I go to a snail's crawl. Because if anybody, that's used to it starts Minecraft over again or loses their boots and jumps into water and realizes, oh wow, right, this is how slow it is in water without Depth Strider,
Yeah.
I don't miss those days at all. And so I find too, when you're doing a lot of like redstone stuff or like water flumes or storage systems, like just having that depth strider makes a world of difference when you're trying to set things up. And I think that wanting to have both on the same set, I think you could maybe include a faster swimming speed with depth strider, but I would argue that maybe that's what they've tried to do with swim mode, like with the fact of like getting you into a horizontal swim position, which has been in the game for so long now that you forget that when we used to swim years ago, you swam vertically, like Gumby, like straight up and down. Really, really weird. What I would like, though, in terms of mobility improvements and water, specifically around the elytra that Wake is saying they're missing, I don't know if you're really missing out, because this is a bane of my existence when I'm doing landscaping around rivers, is that I land in there with the elytra or I jump in, and for whatever reason the elytra gets activated, and then I'm bouncing around like a skipped rock on the top of the surface, unable to get out of that mode until my feet hit the ground. And if you're 4 or 5 blocks from the edge of the river, it takes forever. Because it's very glitchy. It's not like a slow crawl. It's kind of all over the place. It's not unnerving, but it's unpleasant to watch, I think, on stream too, as a content creator. And you can't just press a button. You have to like swim down. Usually the best solution is just swim straight down until you touch the bottom and come back up again, which to me doesn't feel like a good solution to that problem. I would be okay with elytra completely disengaging the moment that I hit water. Mm-hmm. I know how to take off from a water surface. I can do that. I don't need to be on land or jump off of anything to take off. I can get airborne again from water. It's a little tricky, but once you learn how to do it, it's not bad. But the amount of times that I've flown with elytra into water and wanted to continue to use a rocket, I can count them on my hand. I can't say that it's something that I would really need all the time or miss. If I had to give it up in order to not bounce around like a skip rock while I'm trying to build stuff, that I would much rather have that gone than keep elytra and rockets underwater.
Yeah. Dad King of Space in our live chat points out that this is also where Riptide Tridents come in handy for if you're a Bedrock Edition player. If you're if you're just struggling to get moving underwater, then consider throwing a trident in your inventory. There's plenty of them on Bedrock Edition because I believe they're a little bit easier to acquire than on Java still, so definitely worth looking into. I will also add before we move on to the next email that our live chat has informed us that Release Candidate 1 has come out whilst we are recording the podcast, which of course it does, but that also seems to have included some moves to revert the armor protection enchantment changes from pre-release 4. Saren has quoted the changelog article saying, "We've heard your feedback. We expect to rebalance these two enchantments in future and find a better place for them." Yeah, so I think the confusion arising from those changes did seem to indicate maybe the community wants something different out of this rather than just, confusion in general over what the effect was modifying. So yeah, hopefully that's something that we'll see a couple more changes to in, like I said, decimal point releases of 1.21 maybe. Either way, moving on to Daniel H's email, no damage fireworks stars is the subject. Hi Pix and Joel, what are your thoughts on having an option to have custom fireworks deal no damage to the player? They could deal no damage by default, or have damage affected by either adding something to the recipe to make them deal damage, or by adding wool or something similar to make them harmless. I think it would be interesting to see people fly with more fancy fireworks. Daniel went off with a bang because he forgot to add wool to the firework recipe. P.S. This idea is from Kirby number 1 on Reddit. The wool is their idea as well. I'm sharing it with you with their permission, as they would also like to hear your thoughts.
I really like this idea. It adds a lot of personalization to the game, and I think it's such a simple thing to change as well, because in my mind, I think the best solution would be adding that item to the crafting recipe to make the firework charges harmless. So keep them as is by default. They operate exactly as you'd expect, as they always have. But if you add that thing, like wool, which I think also makes sense, to make them harmless, then means that you can use these rockets to fly around the server and leave all kind of colors behind you. I think it's really, really a neat idea. And wool is already used to dampen the sound around skulk sensors, so I think it makes sense. Like you use it to dampen the explosion of your firework rocket, I guess, or firework charge. I'm on board with this. I'd like to even take it to the next step. I think that we should be able to use dye on regular firework rockets, so not the ones that create stars and patterns and explosions, but just the ones that we use to fly around now. I think being able to dye the contrail, the smoke trail, a different color would be kind of fun. It might be worth reworking the graphics of the actual trail because they're pretty simplistic right now. But it's something that No Man's Sky does and has done very well. It's a cosmetic thing. It doesn't affect gameplay, doesn't affect your speed. It's usually an in-game purchase with money that you collect in the game, a reward for quest, or Twitch drops. And so again, you can earn all this stuff other ways, but it doesn't make you a better player than anybody else in No Man's Sky. You don't get cooler functioning things. It's just like the trails in your jetpack or the trails on your ship could be green or purple or orange, or like whatever your favorite color is. And I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I think you got cosmetic boost trails in Rocket League. It's been a long time since I played Rocket League, so I presume there's microtransactions for different stuff and cosmetics in that. And I'm not opposed to the idea. I think colorful fireworks already have a high level of complexity for a fairly underused item. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of them right now because I'm watching Hermitcraft, where CubFan135 has a whole fireworks factory and is really trying to push fireworks because he's got the permit to sell them. But without something like that driving people's interest in fireworks, I really don't see them used all that much, except for flight, or occasionally if people are using firework crossbows and they want to have something a bit more like a Quake Arena or something on their Minecraft servers. So I think it has the greatest impact in multiplayer. I think as somebody who's primarily a single-player guy, you don't see your own rocket trail that much. The benefit would be more or less invisible unless you're in third person with the camera facing towards you, which is not the best perspective for flying. That's how you faceplant mountains very easily, right? So yeah. I do think there are maybe a couple of changes that could be made cosmetically that allow the player's firework trail to be a bit more visible behind them that way if they implemented something like this. I think the danger is just that you end up with an additional crafting stage added to fireworks, which is a system that a whole lot of players don't always interact with. So it has that potential sunk cost problem, which is not the greatest argument I think to bring up in opposition to an idea like this. Like you said, it's more customization, it's a bit more fun, and I think with people being more aware of fireworks, especially now, the crafter has introduced a lot of people to the idea that you can randomize the crafting of fireworks with stuff like this. Just feed in random ingredients and see what the machine spits out, so you can come up with some really fun results that way. And that was one of the things I saw people from the dev team suggesting was a function of the crafter in the early stages of its testing in snapshots. So I think, maybe if people are more interested in using fireworks for that stuff, it makes sense to include them as a cosmetic thing for Elytra flight. We'll move on, though, to our main topic of discussion this week, which is kind of having a retrospective on Trails and Tales. Now that Minecraft 1.20 is drawing to a close, or at least its time is giving over to Minecraft 1.21, we want to do a little look back at what this update has done for our respective gameplay experiences and worlds, and welcome in the next update, presumably in the next episode. So, Minecraft 1.20, the Trails and Tales update, was released on June 7th, 2023. To summarize the stuff that was added in this update, it brought with it bamboo and cherry wood types, the pink petals that come along with cherry grove biomes, hanging signs, the trail ruins structure and archaeology mechanics, decorated pots, the sniffer along with pitcher plants and torch flowers, smithing templates, the camel mob, chiseled bookshelves, and calibrated skulk sensors. The piglin head was added, and mob heads placed on note blocks now produce mob sounds. We also got a new music disc and 4 other music tracks from composer Aaron Cheroff. In the minor updates to 1.20, we got the ability to fill decorated pots up to a stack of a single item. Bats were redesigned, then later wolves, armadillos, and wolf armor were added following the Minecraft Live mob vote last year. 1.20.2 also brought the experimental villager trade rebalance, but this has not yet replaced the villager trades that were established in 1.14. So, we'll start with you, Joel. Do you want to give us a bit of an overview, or do you want to just kick off with, the good, the bad, and the undiscovered of this update?
I think I'd have to go into specifics because where I've been in West Hill for the last 3.5 years, a lot of the stuff that came out with Trails and Tales didn't affect me much.
Right, yeah.
I would say I think the biggest thing about it was I was involved with a lot more unique experiences with the launch than I was previously. You and I did some co-streams. We did one with Archaeoplays and Alraf, where we talked about archaeology and get to play it. We've of course had Alraf on the show recently to talk about his Minecraft story and then the passion that he brought to different things at the game. And so I think that aspect of the update sticks out most as an overview for me, because in game I've really only picked little bits here and there that suit what I'm doing in West Hill. And so the specifics for me is kind of like where I get into the good, the bad, and the ugly. But what about you? Like, what's your overall feeling from Trails and Tales?
Like, I really enjoyed this update. I think my experience with it has been shaped by resetting the survival guide, looking for a more interesting world seed, and wanting to choose one that had a cherry grove really close by, because I think cherry groves are some of the nicest looking biomes that we've had for a while, especially in terms of variety in the overworld. And so I wanted to pick out a more interesting world seed, found a great combination of a mountain with a few cherry trees kind of dusted around the outside. And since then, obviously with the survival guide being the series that it is, but also here and there in Minecraft SOS, I've tried my best to interact with every part of this update where I could. I'm finding that some features are still a little niche in their uses or out of reach for the stage I'm at in my world, but some others have found a really permanent place. I think the only thing that is lacking from Trails and Tales is that the theme feels like it spread itself slightly too thin. And this is going to be the case with any update that isn't something like Caves and Cliffs remodeling the entire world's worth of terrain, or the Nether update focusing very specifically on that dimension. I think Trails and Tales, as I sort of was saying when the update was in development, doesn't feel quite as iconic as previous Minecraft updates that have had a really strong theme, because its goal was a lot more holistic, and it was lots of small additions in different areas that were going to help the world feel more individual and unique to specific players. I can't remember if this was the update or if 1.19 was the update that added the new default player skins as well, but a lot of the focus and the marketing of 1.20 was about individuality and about celebrating world culture, which is why bamboo and cherry groves were added, and the idea of armor trims being something that you could travel the world and explore and collect and personalize your armor with. Like, I think those were kind of key missions in this, but it felt very focused on the player than on transformations of the world of Minecraft, if that makes sense. Like, it feels a lot more kind of like a personal journey for the player than an in-game journey for the game itself.
I would agree, and I looked it up before the show. You're right. It was 1.20 that they added the custom player skins, all the new different skin tones and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I think we can get into what we individually really liked about this update, and then some of the stuff that we felt was a bit of a miss, and then wrap back around, and then maybe take a quick look ahead at what's coming in 1.21 and what we're excited for. Starting, I think for me, I've already said it a little bit, but cherry trees, I think, are living up to a decade of players wishing for cherry trees in this game. Like, I'd seen so many mod packs and like just modified textures and stuff in the past that had added cherry leaves, just pink leaves of any kind, and they're such an iconic thing from East Asia, and flowering cherry grows the world over, but I feel like the sort of sakura blossom vibe was very much like influenced by Japanese culture and the symbolism of those trees. And so I think cherry trees are great. The biome is a great addition. It's made so much better by pink petals. And you were telling us about this when you were designing kind of paths and stuff around West Hill and around the farms around the outside, is that you were finding pink petals a joy to work with in terms of how much control you had over them, right?
No, they're my runaway star. I like the cherry trees. I don't want to look over the cherry wood, like the bark texture either. I really like the look of the trees, not just the leaves. I feel like I've used it in a couple places in West Hill, but it's such a unique color, and pink is such a vibrant color for this particular tree. I haven't worked it into a lot of the builds as far as the wood with the
Yeah.
cherry wood, but I have used the cherry leaves to like highlight vines, make little bushes and gardens and stuff around West Hill. But the petals I've used a lot of different places because it just makes sense. They're pretty pale. They don't always register as bright pink. Some of the smaller ones are almost white. So if you're from a distance, you're just looking at like wildflowers growing along the path. And it's the control. It's the functionality of having 4 different textures that you place one at a time, similar to how candles go down in the game, or sea pickles, but except for it's flat. And you can only put it on a certain number of blocks, like dirt and grass, maybe gravel. I can't remember, but you can't do it on stone or wood. It has to be the kind of thing a flower would grow on. But I would love to see them add more textures with this mechanic and color. Green. Give me green. I would like green.
Yeah.
Just because it would just, especially if you can move it over onto different things, like being able to manually control what might look like clover, growing over dirt blocks, as opposed to just everything having to be on grass and having the edges of your green stuff be straight lines, and I think that one of the things that the petals do, not only do they give like a different geometry because they do hover a little bit higher than the actual ground that you walk on, but they help kind of break up those hard edges between like a stone path and a grass lawn, and you can really soften things up. It's very, very fun. So I'm looking forward to more of that. And I think that's one of the things that I'm hoping is not just like the texture and the block as a runaway hit for me from Cherry Groves. I think it's the mechanic. I think the fact that we have that now in the game is hopefully going to open up doors in the future. That's why I get so excited about them.
Yeah, and that's potentially like fodder for, hey, the sniffer finds a new plant now, and it's something that you can plant in multiple stages like that. And
totally,
I think if a lot of players had their way, they would probably have all flowers retroactively work that way, just for so much more fine control over the way nature grows in the game. But it's a good start, I think. Looking to the other wood type, I think bamboo wood is less obvious as an addition. I think because we've been dealing with bamboo itself and scaffolding for so long, that adding the wood type, and because it doesn't grow naturally as a tree anywhere, it feels a lot less noticeable than cherry trees on the surface. But I think it's still reasonably impactful. Like, I built a bunch of my starter houses had moss roofs, and I worked bamboo blocks into those, and I thought the block of bamboo being green is great, and then it gives you the whole yellow sort of color palette for when you want to break it down into planks and stripped and bamboo mosaic and everything else. I think it does what it needs to, and it provides like a fun addition to the block palette. I think it's going to be the farming to crafting pipeline that the crafter provides in the next update that is probably going to see bamboo hit its heyday. Like, I think people are going to get excited about the ability to have an automatic farm that's relatively simple to set up, that isn't like a TNT-based tree farm or something like that, that goes from harvesting the material to auto-crafting it into planks to turning that into chests and fence gates and sticks and all the kind of stuff that you want it to output. As long as you're fine with it just being one type of wood, if you're dealing with the recipes that show what type of wood it is, like planks and stairs and everything, I think it's going to be one of the first things that people experimenting with the crafter will try and get the most out of. Like, they'll try and see how many recipes can I automate and start with bamboo as a catalyst for that.
Yeah, I that's on my list. Super smelter, bamboo powered, like that's on the hit list for sure.
Yeah.
And even before the crafter, I mean, I stopped making chests with all of my wood that I use for decoration. I started using bamboo to make the chests because it saves you just a ton. You can grow bamboo so much quicker in the background while you do other things. Yeah. And then just chop it down and get yourself a couple of chests that you need for shulker boxes or whatever it is that you're doing. So bamboo as a decorative block in terms of the woods, the green for sure. I've certainly used it and would like to use more of it, but the yellowy ones I really haven't had a chance to push for it because it doesn't really go with the established palettes that I had in West Hill. But this is a very specific case. I'm not necessarily poo-pooing it. I'm just saying, like, well, it's not really something that I've done a lot with. It's a little on the yellowy green side. I can see it being difficult to work with. I think that the green bamboo block, that's hard to say, is is a little bit more versatile in terms of the other things that you can use it in. I know I've used the end texture of the green bamboo block for things like, sinking it into the ground and getting different textures and grasses and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing we don't have a blue bamboo block, because that would be imagine how difficult that would make our lives here on this Minecraft podcast.
Mojang, don't.
Yeah, don't even think about it. Don't try. So I think Trail Ruins, going back to like the main structure that was added with this update, and one of our early experiences with this was digging one out and excavating that and going through all of our finds and everything on the stream with Archeo plays. I think as a part of the world in a single-player experience, they've been fun. They've been a little infrequent for me, but that's because they only appear in specific biomes and often when specific generation is involved. And I think they're not something you stumble into all the time unless you're exploring a lot. But it doesn't feel necessary to find a bunch of them, so I think you can sort of treat them as distinct sites and almost like artifacts in their own right. Sort of similar to when you're looking for a desert temple, you find one and you're probably good, like, unless you're looking for enchanted golden apples and trying to farm certain resources for them at that point. But yeah, it doesn't feel necessary to get a bunch of them. They're cool projects once you get to one. And in my case, I was fortunate enough to find all 4 of the armor trims from a trail ruin, from the first trail ruin that I found, where I think some people only found 3, and then they think, oh, I have to go out and find another one of these to complete the whole set. So there's a little bit of frustration involved with those, but the mechanics are fun. Brushing gravel to get artifacts out of it feels like a fun sort of scavenger hunt style. I think archaeology is achieving what they set out to achieve, was that it's not a smash and grab mentality when you're uncovering these structures. It's very much concerned with taking things slow and steady, being careful, the kind of thing that Minecraft players have not really been given a challenge like this up until now, in the same sense that they hadn't been given a challenge like the Warden, where there was a stealth mechanic really being enforced by the way that area and the Warden mechanics were designed. And so they've managed to break that out into another mechanic that sort of requires you to be careful in the form of archaeology.
Yeah, my experience with archaeology has just been like with live streams and special situations with you and Archeo plays. I've not seen anything. I don't even think any of us on the Citadel have sought a dig site out and excavated it. But I agree. I think that the change of pace and the attention to discovery and the just kind of, it could have been the company, it could have been the experience, or it could be both. The idea and the need to catalog everything, I think, as we were going, was really interesting. It was a really different take. I'm a digital pack rat in Minecraft. I keep all the things when I'm mining out an area or doing something, but I don't necessarily like label everything and put it away carefully. Like, sure, it goes into the cobblestone goes in the cobblestone box, but I'm not keeping track of how much cobblestone came out of that dig. And I'm not keeping track of anything that I've found that's just like, oh, cool, I found a chest or I found an abandoned mine shaft. Like, I just strip it and sort it out later. I'm not really paying attention. It's video game loot. It's very different with an archaeology experience. I feel like you pay attention a little bit more. I like the RP of like thinking about what these things might have looked like when they were fully built and the colors that are involved with them. We had someone showcase one on our Minecraft Hangout last month, and I think you made the comment of just how Wandering Trader the color palette is on them. And I think there's some neat nods to like that mysterious Minecraft lore that Mojang knows, but we don't. And I think that they used archaeology wisely in that way to kind of add more color buried underground and give you more questions than answers, right?
Yeah, and they also have the Wandering Trader mechanics of a lot of impatient players are going to completely overlook them or probably just like probably just dispose of them at a moment's notice. But I think the Trail Ruins have been a fun addition, a very different gameplay mechanic, and so not everybody's cup of tea, but for the people for whom these are designed, they really hit. So I think that's a really good point in 1.20's column. Have you done a whole lot with armor trims on the Citadel?
Absolutely zero. And I think that's because we're not a big RP server. And even as a server, it's even more hermity than Hermitcraft. Like, I generally don't see other players very often. There's not a lot of co-stream happening because it's all streaming and not edited content for YouTube. There's not a lot of interaction where you would see another player on screen all the time. And I have some armor trim that I have found, I think by accident, and has also been dropped off by people that have doubles and thought like, hey, you might want this. I can see myself using it maybe as I finish the details inside the keep in West Hill, because the interior of that has not been finished yet. And I can see using it for decorative armor that I might want to like use to flank the throne room or decorate the different little niches or naves in the keep. That would make sense, right? But I don't see myself wearing it as something specific. That could change if I find an armor trim that has a sci-fi vibe to it when I move on to my next project. Maybe, like it could be fun to have like neon green lines going through my armor. That could look really cool. I might go down that road. But I find for stuff like that, when I think about how I look in Minecraft, my brain goes to, I'd rather have the control of just creating my own skin, going outside the game and creating something very specific, in that light. Like I might make my Elytra look like X-Wings, just that could be fun. So that's the kind of thing that I'd be more likely to do than the armor trim. But I like the idea of pushing the exploration. Like it made sense as an update because it came on the tail, well, not immediately, but it's like a couple updates after the 1.18, the Caves and Cliffs, when that all went out, to encourage players to continue to explore the very updated overworld, I think was a great idea. And they also, added the armor trims to a bunch of different loot situations. There's Deep Dark, there's like all the different places that you can get them. It's not just wandering around and exploring. Sometimes you have to go dangerous places. I wasn't a fan of the changes that came along with them, which was the netherite changes, making netherite harder to get. That's on my not so fun list. And I could I have spent more time looking for netherite before the change? Absolutely. I knew it was coming for months. And I got some stuff, but I feel like now if I want a netherite piece, it's like, oh man, that's going to be a chore to do that, right? Now, that's to say that unless somebody else in the server already has a netherite template, and then we can go ahead and copy it and move it around. But I think that the armor trim it's a neat idea, but I understand that I'm not the audience, and I think that's where I stand on it. It's cool, but just not for me.
I think that's fair, yeah. I think armor trims themselves, like you said, have been a great reason to visit structures, especially the structures that you might not really care about if you've played Minecraft a couple of times before, like jungle temples, for example. Like, nobody really bothers with them unless it's like, oh, okay, this is just here in the jungle, I might as well visit, but you're not seeking them out unless you want the wild armor trim, at which point you go find a jungle temple, because that's the only place you can get them. I think they've been a good reason to visit structures. They can clearly expand in future. We've got two coming actually with the trial chambers in 1.21. It's a system. It's something that they can expand upon in future and add stuff based on player feedback. It's the same kind of loot as, music discs getting added along with new structures, and, there's a couple of cosmetic things that just feel good for players to find. I think in terms of the expenditure, they're actually really well balanced because they still feel like a valuable item for you to find. It's the equivalent of finding 7 diamonds when you run into one of these things in a structure, because you think, okay, that's another one that I don't have to copy because now I have a duplicate of it. And so I think that keeps them interesting for people to get hold of. But like you, I don't really like using armor trims, and I feel like I like collecting them more than I enjoy customizing my armor with them. Like, I got some on my first netherite set in the survival guide because I wanted to demonstrate the mechanics of how armor trims worked. I never really settled on a pattern that I liked. I just used the first ones I got, which was probably the shipwreck one. And since then, even in Minecraft SOS, I didn't apply any new armor to my armor trim. I lost my first set of armor in survival guide in a tragic shulker box accident, and after that, I never armor trimmed my second set of netherite, and it just didn't occur to me to want to do that. I think part of it is also not wearing a chest plate super often because I've usually got Elytra equipped, so it always feels incomplete if it's just helmet, leggings, shoes. But then I never quite settled on the design that I thought really represented me. So maybe I'm waiting for the right thing to come along. Maybe armor trim is not for me, but I do like having the full set. I like collecting them. I like the fact that there's an advancement for using 8 of them on the armor. I have a full set of them all lining my my storage chests in the survival guide world. Like on the left hand side as you walk into my storage room, there's like a full set of the armor trims just to see what they all look like. I'm gonna have to expand that for the opposite side probably when they add the ones from the trial chambers. But until that point, I think it's been a fun experience as part of 1.20, even if it's not something that I used for its intended purpose.
They're a really attractive and special looking icon. Like the sprite is really cool.
The sprite is really good, yeah.
For how little they do, right? Like it looks really cool compared to some of the other more powerful things in Minecraft. You know, you think about a wither skull, or you think about the diamonds, you know, and how useful those are.
Yeah.
And compared to the armor trim, like the armor trims are very fancy looking, and yet they don't really do a whole lot, you know?
I think this is what people have wanted Mojang to do with the look of enchanted books. Like there are texture packs that give it like say a fire protection enchanted book will have like a flame on the front of it, or like the flame bow enchantment will do that, and like you know, they wanted to have that sort of personalized touch to them and make them a bit more graphic. So yeah, I think armor trims sort of fill that niche in like a desirable looking collectible item that way. I think the only other thing I've got on my like super good list, and I think you're going to agree with this one, is hanging signs. I feel like they've not only been really fun for detail and for text placement, they were also the catalyst for the ability to write on and edit both sides of signs. And that has been a game changer in a number of ways that I don't think anybody expected until it was proved possible, and then everyone went, no, this is great. This is the change that, like, this is a massive win for the player base in general.
Yeah, as someone that uses signs, both hanging and normal signs, as decoration, and I use the ability to edit them to put like what looks like nails in the corners and stuff like that. Being able to edit those signs, being able to place the sign down, decide to edit it and change it if you don't like it. I mean, fantastic. Absolutely love it. Especially if you're dyeing the text as well and you need to change that. That's been really, really cool. I've not gone around and waxed anything and kept the signs from being edited, but like we also live on a server where like there's only 5 other people. I will just find out who did it. Like, you know, if someone was to change it as a prank, like it's not going to be secret for very long. Also, we're just not that kind of server, so it doesn't really matter. I like the fact that hanging signs are so diverse and that you can use them as railings. You can hang them in different ways. It does take a little bit of extra block placement sometimes if you want to get a horizontal hanging sign where it would normally be vertical. You kind of have to kind of do a little finagling there. If you're hanging it out in space, you can't just hang it from the top block and get the right texture. That's a little bit tricky. But once you learn the tricks, they're very versatile. And I really like that they obviously come in all the different colors. Nice that they are the stripped wood texture as well, instead of the planks, which is what the other signs are. So I really found them quite fun to use around West Hill. I mean, like I'm very specific again, but like they fit the medieval vibe very, very well.
Yeah, I think everyone like has universal praise for hanging signs from what I've seen. Like, I think the only complaint I've ever heard about them was that we wish we could fit slightly more text on these, and that's like that's the only thing that I've ever really heard anybody say in negatives about hanging signs. So I expect a lot of people out there agreeing with us.
Speaking of wood and decoration, chiseled bookshelves are also up there for me, right there with the hanging signs in terms of the use, because for the decorative control that you get with having not only just an empty bookshelf that looks like an empty bookshelf, not a loom that sort of passes maybe for an empty bookshelf, and then the ability to add as many or as few books onto the shelf as you want, I think it really, really adds a lot. We talk a lot about anytime you can add motion to Minecraft, whether it's flowing water or a smoke plume from a campfire, maybe tucking one of those in a chimney. I think the next best thing is implied motion. And so when you have a bunch of bookshelves, like the default bookshelves that are all completely uniform and completely the same and create a grid of books, versus a bunch of chiseled bookshelves that you then control where the books are. You can put less on the top shelf because maybe the people that are using them are short. You can create places where different books are missing from different shelves. You can aim and put them where you want them. And the absence of books creates the illusion that people are moving them when you're not around. And it's that implied bit of life and texture to a build I think is really, really useful.
Yeah, chisel bookshelves are something I haven't spent enough time exploring the possibilities of, and I think it's because my project on SOS was not really build focused, and when it was very sci-fi. And then on Survival Guide, I've not done a whole lot of building where I'm just building interiors for the sake of interiors, right? Like I've got some very functional interiors. I've got one house that's like properly decorated, and then I've got a storage room interior. So I haven't done a whole lot of messing around with the aesthetics of chisel bookshelves. I know they're good. I know they're fun for decoration, and I like the redstone applications of them. I think they managed to dial that in really well in snapshots and get community feedback to the point where I think those are going to be really solid. I think I'm going to start using them for redstone when it comes to the next iteration of my copper aging facility, because they're the thing that if you take a book out of a slot and it's the last one you interacted with, then it still tracks the comparator signal from 1 through 6. And so having a comparator signal of 6 is ideal for the setup that I have for the copper aging machine. And that was previously done with like cake slices and composters and furnaces with a fixed number of items in. Whereas if I can just craft something out of wood, probably auto-craft it in the next update, and then just walk around placing them, fill one slot with a book, remove the book again, so I only ever need to use one book for that, and then I can program all of them with the same comparator signal. That saves a ton of time and resources, I think. So that's honestly going to be a big thing for me when I start doing more redstone systems work. I'm just not there yet in the Survival Guide world, so I haven't really had a chance to flex that muscle for a while.
It reminds me of the punch cards from the old computers that used to be the size of storage rooms,
the
holes in them and stuff like that.
When you're like clocking in for work, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the Wile E. Coyote and Sam the Sheepdog cartoons, that kind of stuff too. Yeah, totally. I forgot about that. The whole time you were talking, I was thinking about using a bookshelf with the crafter, so that you could use the bookshelf to control like the output of the crafter versus the output of the bookshelf, so that you can auto export the craft. But then I think another crafter would probably be the better choice, because then that crafter would also have the 9 slots that the crafting crafter would have.
Yes.
We're full of stuff today. Real clear communication. But I can see other things where I've had to load up chests in the past, or a dropper in the past, to get the right kind of output signal from a comparator, where a bookshelf would be, a chiseled bookshelf, I should specify, would be a much better solution, a way faster solution, and a visual solution that you can see from the outside and not have to open up the chest and do the math as to how many stacks you need to do. So there's definitely a lot of strength there that I haven't messed around with either, because I haven't done redstone in a while, actually.
Yeah, I think it's something that everyone's going to get back into when the crafter arrives, though. So maybe that's the time to mess with the chisel bookshelf stuff as well. I think in terms of other stuff that didn't quite hit for me in this update, I think the main thing that stands out is camels. I think camels are a bit of a misfire in terms of gameplay stuff. Like, I think they're good for what their intended purpose was, I think, to flesh out the relatable experience for players in game, like players seeing some of their own culture in game, sort of similar to how Cherrywood was, a nod to East Asian cultures. Like camels, obviously desert cultures, like in the Middle East and places, are going to have like camels as a very common animal that we don't, you in Nova Scotia, you probably don't see a whole lot of camels. I don't see a great deal of them in England either. So yeah, like I think camels obviously have a place in people's hearts and imaginations, and it's cool that they're in the game in that sense. But I think they're a solid mob on paper. The mechanics just don't really align with how I play Minecraft. And I think part of my disappointment with camels is that the access to them is so limited. Like, why only one per village? Why no like spawning and respawning mechanics? If you remove a camel from a village in a desert, should the villagers like effectively create a camel in the same way that they create an iron golem? Like, probably not. The camels aren't meant to be golems in that way. They're not constructed. But also, if you remove a camel from a village, you've still only just got one camel. Like, you have to go and find another desert village if you want to breed them. And sometimes you find a desert and it's only got one village in it, so you have to go to yet another far-flung location in order to track down the camel. Like, I wouldn't have seen camels at all if I'd stuck around in the Survival Guide world from Season 2, because the nearest desert was 4,000 blocks away. So I think the problem with camels is an access problem. And then when it comes to single-player worlds, you don't need transport for 2 players. And I already use stuff like horses infrequently, and when I do, I value speed. And camel speed is non-negotiable. It has 1 speed, and that is slower than most horses. So I just think, while the notion behind camels is a good one, I think gameplay-wise, they're just not really arriving in the sphere of experience that I need, I guess.
I had the same experience when I first found one in game, because when the snapshots were coming out, I was exploring them, exploring the signs, finding the camels, and I mean, there's the neat idea behind them with the extended jump that they have, like the jump boost.
The
But
sort of
in a game,
dash thing that they do, yeah.
yeah, but in a game like Minecraft, it's so difficult to gauge that kind of stuff in a first person. And so
Yeah.
like you think, yeah, I'll jump and it'll be far. And like I guess I went 5 blocks. I can't really tell. I certainly didn't make it across the pond that I was trying to jump across. And like, well, if this was a ravine, that would have been bad. And so, because they don't have any real height or arc to the jump, like it's just a straightforward dash, like you said, the chances of you hitting the face of the other side, clipping your toenails on the block with the hitbox of the camel, and then just kind of going straight down was too high. I didn't find them all that useful. I think, like you said earlier, it's I chalk it up to a culture thing. Like that's why they're in the game, just to kind of make the game more diverse. I will say that I do like that they're large. I think it's cool to see large mobs in the game that are not bosses. Like it's not the warden, it's not the wither. They're pretty big. When you walk by, like it's a you move your mouse up to look at them. They're a pretty sizable thing. And if you have them, I think, in a pen where their heads are like sticking up above the walls that you've got them behind, I think that's also cool. So I would like to see larger mobs in the game. I think that could be interesting. The trick is, of course, making it interesting from a gameplay perspective. Think about putting an elephant in the savannah, right? Like that would look cool, but it has to go beyond just looking cool. Like there has to be some sort of fun use for them. And I think actually that's one of the appeals of the sniffer, right?
Yeah.
Is that it's a big lumbering mob. It's unique. It has some cool gameplay mechanics. They're a little harder to find at first, but once you have 2, you can breed them. And then they have that fun new mechanic of like, don't kill it to get the drops. Let it roam around and it will get the drops for you. So there's just that new kind of back and forth between the player. It's a new relationship between the player and the mob, which I think is really cool. I don't know about the drops. Like the pitcher plants are cool. They kind of are in the almost good like section for me, because I like the look of the pitcher plants, but I would want to be able to use them in the different variant stages. And we've talked about that before on the show. I like the torch flowers. They're very vibrant and cool looking, but then the green stems and the way that they're colored don't really match anything else in the game from the overworld standpoint. So it's really hard to work them into your build. It's like how the berry bushes clash with everything except a taiga biome. So I feel like there could have been a little bit more, I guess, care into how are these going to look in all the different biomes and how useful are they going to be, because they are really unique looking. I've made a farm in West Hill of pitcher plants, and I think they look great. One of the things I do like about them is the ability to plant them on farmland if you want, and have like the bulb at the bottom to give them a little bit extra height, and eliminate the RNG of where they are in the block, because in farmland they're always in the dead middle. So if you want a really cool looking grid-like farm of these things in a field, plant them in farmland. And if you want the random kind of way that they appear on most blocks, then when you have the flower and you place it on grass, it's going to work like every other 2 tall flower. And so I like that diversity. I don't think torch flowers can be. Do you have to grow torch flowers on farmland the same way?
You do, yeah. They grow from seeds, both of the plants. So they're like
same
crops.
idea. Yeah, I didn't use them because, again, they clash with what I was doing. But again, the ability to put those in the center as well would also be a plus for them.
Yeah, I haven't quite found the right project for either torch flowers or pitcher plants, but I grow them both on the roof of my storage building, where I've got a couple of little aesthetic crop farms up there. And I've got some sniffers in a pen outside of my storage room. They're just sort of out there on the grass plain, and I love them a great deal. I think they're such a cool design. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. And I think I have this sort of decision paralysis around what the role of the sniffer is. I like them being out there so I can see them, but I don't know for certain how I'm going to like incorporate them in a more permanent way? Like, are they just going to be grazing animals out there in like a pasture, or am I going to like make a little farm for them so I can get the seeds more efficiently? I'm sort of stuck right now, but that's a personal thing, I think, between like what I want to do with them and what their like relatable function sort of is. But either way, like I think the sniffer is another solid addition. Perhaps isn't going to hit with every player. I think a few people still consider them kind of useless because they just give you aesthetic stuff and, you know, dyes that you have access to in other ways. But I think in terms of the mechanics, in terms of exploration, and providing a system that could maybe be expanded in future, I think they're a solid addition for me.
Is there anything in the game that you haven't got to from this update yet?
Calibrated skulk sensors are the only other thing that really comes to mind. Like, when I was kind of scratching my head about this update, like, there's a few things that aren't going to have much impact in my experience. Like, you know, I see a redesigned bat, I think, oh yeah, those have been redesigned, and then I stop thinking about the bat again because they're just, like, flying around randomly in caves. And I saw plenty of bats when I was digging out a hole to bedrock, let me tell you. But then, yeah, like, I think the calibrated skulk sensors are the only thing that I haven't quite done anything with. I did one thing with them on Minecraft SOS when I was setting up a tent where people could go and splash themselves with all of the potions to get the advancement. And I put a calibrated skulk sensor under the floor that would react to the button being pressed, but that could just as easily have been something else that triggered the streaker. I just didn't want it to be going off when people were walking in there or like doing anything else. And so, yeah, like I can see the value in them. I just haven't found their niche yet. I haven't been doing complex enough redstone that requires that, or I haven't been like making automatic doors that I want to only trigger when I perform a certain action or walk in to a certain build. So I recognize that they're going to be really important further down the line. I just haven't got there yet.
That's where I am with them as well. You know, when I think about my sci-fi build that's coming up next, like there's a lot of redstone things that I need to explore. I really haven't worked with skulk sensors at all. So I'm a couple of updates behind as far as the redstone tech that's in the game. But I'll be exploring those as they come up. We mentioned armor trim already, and we mentioned archaeology. And those are the things, along with calibrated skulk sensors, that I really haven't poked around with in this update. And that's not to say that, you know, I mean, armor trim, I've already said my piece, but if I find an archaeological dig, like I might take the time to dig one out on the Citadel. Like I can't see myself just plowing through it, right? So I might just bookmark it, come back to it later. Could be a good break from a future project. You know, I think that's up there as well. But yeah, it's only the calibrated skulk sensor that I haven't really explored. So,
looking ahead then to Minecraft 1.21, what's the first thing you're going to mess with once the new features arrive on Thursday?
I would say it's going to be difficult to restrict myself from not playing with the crafter. Like that is top tier, I think. And I want to kind of think ahead and prepare for new builds. And even if I want to break from what I'm doing in Westhill, because every once in a while I get a little burnt out. I'm loving what I'm doing right now, but sometimes you're just like stuck creatively, or, you know, you don't have the resources for something you need to go dig. And I've taken breaks to do like the moss farm, and I think I did like an amethyst farm and a copper farm. So I might take the time to go, and things like updating the smelter that we all have in the Nether, and instead of using blaze rods, maybe we'll re-outfit to use bamboo, which we can grow in the Nether, and harvest and do all that automatically, and then never run out of fuel there. So then people can always just go and dump whatever they need in those 8 furnaces and have it, you know, be used. I'd like to personally make a much larger smelter, my own, you know, later on. But yeah, I think there's a lot of community farms on the server that could absolutely benefit from the crafter, and having little crafter, I'm not sure what you want to call them, modules, I guess, attached to the output. Iron farm, for example.
Yes.
Not that we have a great need because it's a pretty slow iron farm, but there's only 6 double chests last I checked. And so if I could switch that to have them be crafted into iron blocks instead of iron ingots, then it's going to just save a lot of time, you know, down the line. Things like utilizing the poppies for dye and like all that kind of stuff, just being able to use things for what they are. And I think that it opens up a lot of gameplay, pardon me, that I really like, which is figuring out how to take one item that's being manufactured and then split it so that you're getting the couple of things that you want from it. Like some people want the poppies for the poppy's sake. Some people will want the dye. Some people will want ingots. Some people will want the iron blocks. So there's a few farms around that we could absolutely use the crafter to craft a couple of different things in one go. And I'm curious how much room that's going to take. That's another thing. That it might not be possible in some of our older farms that, of course, never considered it. But that's my big excitement for it.
Yeah, I think the crafter is going to be most people's first go-to. It's definitely mine as well. Like, I've been stockpiling redstone that I've been buying from my clerics in the trading halls so that I can mass craft crafters more or less as soon as possible. But then, yeah, like, it's getting applied to the iron farm. Like, a melon farm is going to benefit hugely from that. Anything that involves breaking down bones and turning them into bone meal and into bone blocks for easy storage. Probably mass crafting stuff like fireworks as well, so it's always there when you need it. Like, you can just go to effectively a vending machine for half of the stuff that you're going to be using on a daily basis in your world. But then I think after the crafter and maybe messing around with a couple of the copper blocks, I'm headed straight out to a trial chamber because I just want to explore that experience. I want to see how it fits into a long-term survival world. All of my experiences with trial chambers so far have been single-use ones, basically. Like, I've been there in a snapshot, in a fresh world, not really considering what I would do with the world and the trial chamber experience long-term, and seeing how those fit into survival Minecraft is going to be really fascinating, I think, over the next little while. Seeing what the technical community does with them, seeing how people on more casual servers are going to treat them as an experience, the instance loot being a reason to go and run the thing multiple times with multiple players. I think there's going to be a lot of reward to be had out of those structures, and I wonder how the Minecraft community is going to settle on best exploring that facet of the game now.
With the upcoming change from medieval to more of a sci-fi futuristic look, copper being one of the few metals in the game, I can see myself designating a trial chamber for mining out and just using the resources and seeing what I might use. I don't use a lot of copper right now. A couple of roofs maybe in West Hill are copper with different prismarine highlights and stuff, but I could see myself utilizing the tuff and the copper that you could mine out of that. I'm actually just curious to see how much you get. Like, if you find a decent sized trial chamber and you just completely, maybe treat it like an archaeological dig and see what comes out of it. And I don't know about cataloging it, but it could be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, I think it's going to be equivalent to finding one of those huge veins of copper and being able to get that amount of blocks from it, I think is pretty likely. Well, we're very excited, of course, for the release of the update later this week, and I'm sure by the time we do our next show, people will be emailing in about what they've done in the first week of 1.21. We would encourage that. We love to hear feedback from the community about what you folks have been up to, so let us know at the usual email address. In the meantime, that's where we're going to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community. Pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it every week. There's always lively discussions happening in the various text channels, and we have our monthly Minecraft audio hangouts where our patrons can let us know what they've been up to in Minecraft that month. I think the July one of those, and probably the end of June one, is going to be full of 1.20 stuff, so 1.21 stuff rather, so really looking forward to that. We currently have 323 patrons, which is up 9 from last week, so thank you to a bunch of you for jumping on board. Special thanks go out to our content engineers, as always. Thank you Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, Party Voyager, and Yitz for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are out every Monday on all of the major podcasting platforms. That includes YouTube. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny. Online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide has just made a return to its third season. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for the aforementioned YouTube series, and I've been playing a little Elden Ring on the side lately in hype for the DLC. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search, and aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online can be found at joelduggan.com. That includes a link to the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast all about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. I'm Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, very easy to find. I do work on Westhill, of course, Thursday through Sunday, and right now on Fridays we're working on the UCS TIE Interceptor from LEGO, so a little bit of a break from Minecraft. And if you're watching this, it's actually on the table behind me, and it is not a small build. I am very excited.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and some tricky trials are ahead.